A single line of hidden text could topple a kingdom. In the shadows of the medieval world, the art of the cipher was not a game, but a deadly serious craft practiced by monks, spies, and kings. This is the story of the Codebreakers who shaped history from behind the scenes. By the end, you will see the flicker of candlelit scriptoria in every line of code that protects your digital life today. We will uncover how a quiet monk's innovation sparked a secret war of wits, and why a mysterious book from this era still guards its secrets from the world's smartest minds. What forgotten secret from the past do you think still holds power over our present? That monastic scribe was not just copying text, he was systematically transforming it. His goal was to create a message that appeared as meaningless gibberish to anyone but its intended recipient. This deliberate scrambling of writing is the very heart of a cipher. It is vital to distinguish this from its close cousin, the code. A cipher works at the level of the individual letter. Each character in your original message is swapped out according to a fixed rule. Think of it like a secret decoder wheel, where every A becomes a D, every B becomes an E, and so on. A code, however, operates on a much larger scale. It replaces entire words or phrases with prearranged symbols. A codebook might dictate that the word attack is represented by the word apple, or that the phrase at dawn is written as the blue fox. For medieval cryptographers, ciphers were the tool of choice. They were elegantly simple to implement with just a pen, parchment, and a sharp mind. They did not require bulky, incriminating codebooks that could be discovered by an enemy. The power of a cipher lies entirely in the secrecy of its key, that single rule which locks and unlocks the message. With nothing but the 26 letters of the alphabet and a spark of ingenuity, a world of secrets could be hidden in plain sight. This simple yet profound act of substitution would become the first volley in a centuries-long war of wits. Within the hushed scriptoria, the first ciphers were born of practical necessity. A monk hunched over a precious manuscript faced a dilemma. His labor of love, a unique theological interpretation or a newly compiled chronicle, was incredibly valuable. If another monastery simply copied it, they would gain the knowledge without the years of dedicated work. Intellectual property, as we might call it today, needed a shield. So these scribes began to experiment with the very letters they were writing. They developed beautifully simple substitution ciphers. One common method was to replace every vowel with a simple dot or a specific mark. The word secret might be written as S-C-R-T. Another approach was to shift letters in the alphabet so that an A became a B, an E became an F, and so on. This is the very same principle that would later be called the Caesar cipher. A famous early practitioner was the Venerable Bede, an English monk of the 8th century. He encoded passages within his own writings, not to hide state secrets, but to protect his intellectual creation and to perhaps denote special, reserved knowledge for his inner circle. The systems were elementary, yes. A determined mind could likely unravel them, but their importance cannot be overstated. They established a revolutionary concept that would echo through the centuries, the idea that written information itself could hold immense power, power that must be deliberately concealed from prying eyes. This monastic tradition of secret writing created Europe's first foundational pool of cryptologic knowledge, a quiet flame of ingenuity kept alive by men of peace. But to write these secrets, they needed more than just an idea. They needed a physical tool, an instrument of deception that fit in the palm of the hand. The codebreaker's most vital possession was not a physical object, but a set of instructions known as the cipher key. This was the secret rulebook, the algorithm that transformed gibberish back into sense. It might be a simple phrase like shift every letter forward by 3, or a complex table listing which strange symbol corresponded to which common letter. This key was guarded with a level of secrecy that would rival any modern password. To lose it, to have it captured, was a catastrophic failure. A message without its key became a permanent lockbox, its secrets lost to time, a haunting reminder of the fragility of hidden knowledge. These early artisans of information, with their simple tools and guarded keys, were laying the groundwork for a new kind of warfare, one fought not with swords but with intellect. Their quiet work in the cloisters was about to be tested on a far grander and more dangerous stage. These shadowy figures were not merely clerks or scribes. They were intellectual athletes, a rare breed of polymath whose minds were their greatest weapons. To become a master codebreaker in the medieval world was to be a scholar, a mathematician, a linguist, and a psychologist all at once. The role demanded a unique fusion of rigorous logic and boundless creativity. The first and most grueling requirement was patience, a superhuman degree of it. A single encrypted message could represent weeks, even months, of painstaking labor. There were no machines to assist them, only parchment, ink, and the relentless power of their own observation. They would copy the scrambled text over and over, their eyes searching for any tiny crack in the cipher's armor. Their greatest insight was understanding that language itself has a rhythm, a hidden fingerprint. A skilled cryptanalyst knew that in Latin, and in the emerging vernacular languages like French or English, certain letters appeared far more often than others. The letter E, for instance, was almost always the most common. They would perform a frequency analysis, tallying every symbol in the coded message. The character that appeared most often was likely a substitute for E. From that single foothold, they could begin to unravel the entire system, deducing other common letters like T and A, and then slowly piecing together words from the fragments. But this was more than a mathematical exercise. It was a profound act of psychological warfare waged across parchment and time. The codebreaker had to get inside the mind of the person who created the cipher. What would their opponent consider clever? Would they use a simple shift or something more complex? Would they leave a telltale clue in their choice of symbols? This mental duel, this attempt to outthink an unseen adversary, was the core of their art, and with every secret they uncovered, they carried a terrifying burden. A codebreaker often became the sole holder of the realm's most dangerous truths. From plots of assassination to rumors of war, their discretion had to be absolute, for a single misplaced word could destabilize a throne. This intellectual legacy, built on patience, pattern recognition, and psychological insight, would soon be tested as ciphers evolved from simple puzzles into formidable intellectual fortresses. The codebreaker's psychological duel was about to escalate into an intellectual war. For centuries, the simple substitution cipher had reigned supreme, its logic a comfortable puzzle for those in the know. But its reign was built on a fatal flaw, a weakness that was becoming all too clear to the era's sharpest minds. The very frequency analysis that empowered codebreakers, the counting of common letters, was now the codemaker's greatest vulnerability. A single alphabet, once cracked, laid bare an entire message. The pressure for a new, unbreakable system was immense, and the answer emerged not from a European court, but from the scholarly circles of the medieval Arab world. A brilliant scholar named Al-Kindi authored a revolutionary text that did not just create ciphers, but systematically explained how to dismantle them. He formally described the technique of frequency analysis, the very method that would render simple substitution ciphers obsolete. This was a pivotal moment, the birth of cryptanalysis as a formal science. In a stunning twist, the very act of breaking a cipher gave birth to the need for a stronger one. This triggered a relentless arms race, a feedback loop of innovation where every new decryption method spurred the invention of a more complex encryption technique. The result of this race was the polyalphabetic cipher, a conceptual leap so profound it changed the game entirely. Imagine a cipher that did not rely on one secret alphabet, but on many. Instead of every letter E in your message always becoming, say, a J, it could become a J in the first word, an R in the second, and an X in the third. The rule for substitution changed with every single letter, obliterating the consistent patterns that frequency analysis relied upon. A coded message that once took a master codebreaker a few days to unravel could now take a lifetime. This was no longer a simple lock. It was a labyrinth with shifting walls. This formidable new tool did not emerge in a vacuum. It was directly forged in the fires of rising royal power, as ambitious kings and popes sought unprecedented control over their domains and their rivals. No single office in the medieval world held more secrets than the Vatican. The papal chancery operated as a nerve center of Christendom, its encrypted dispatches flowing along dusty roads to bishops, kings, and emperors. A papal election, a sentence of excommunication, or the terms of a clandestine military alliance, each of these world-shaking decrees had to be shielded from hostile eyes. The stakes were nothing less than the spiritual and political authority of the Church itself. To protect its communications, the Chancery's scribes evolved beyond simple substitution, crafting ciphers of impressive complexity. They began seeding their messages with deliberate deception. Nulls were inserted, strange symbols that meant absolutely nothing, placed solely to mislead and confuse any unauthorized reader trying to perform a frequency count. Even more cleverly, they employed homophones, assigning multiple different symbols to a single common letter. The letter E, for instance, might be represented by 5 different coded characters within the same message. This brilliant tactic shattered the predictable patterns that codebreakers relied upon, turning a clear text fingerprint into a chaotic jumble. A surviving papal cipher from this era is a masterpiece of paranoia, a sprawling grid of symbols, nulls, and homophones that reveals a deep institutional anxiety. Every strange glyph and redundant character speaks to the geopolitical pressures squeezing the Holy See from all sides. Yet this very act of defensive innovation had an unintended consequence. By perfecting the art of the cipher, the papacy handed a blueprint to its greatest rivals. Every encrypted bull sent to a European court was also a silent lesson in the power of secret writing, a lesson that kings and queens were quick to learn for themselves. A king's most dangerous enemy was often not the army across the border, but the unsealed letter carried by a captured messenger. As monarchs consolidated power, they transformed the monastic art of secret writing into an instrument of state. Ciphers became the lifeblood of royal diplomacy and espionage, used to coordinate military movements, negotiate secret treaties, and manage networks of spies. The French King Louis XI, a master of realpolitik, understood this power intimately. He maintained a dedicated cadre of cipher secretaries, men who encoded his directives and decoded the intercepted messages of his rivals, creating a web of intelligence that gave him a decisive edge. These royal ciphers grew in sophistication, often surpassing even the Vatican's elaborate systems. They began incorporating numerical codes to represent specific high-risk words. The name of a rival king, a key city, or the word rebellion itself would be replaced not by another letter, but by a number, making the message far more resilient to prying eyes. This created a two-layer system of secrecy that was incredibly difficult to penetrate without the key, but this very strength contained a fatal weakness. The entire system's security rested on one fragile point, the cipher key itself. If that key were lost or, worse, deliberately betrayed, the consequences were catastrophic. This grim reality found its ultimate expression in the tragedy of Mary, Queen of Scots. Imprisoned by her cousin Queen Elizabeth I, Mary relied on a sophisticated cipher to communicate with her supporters through a series of hidden letters. She believed her messages about a plot to free her and place her on the English throne were secure. But Elizabeth's spymaster, Sir Francis Walsingham, had already penetrated her circle. His own team of codebreakers intercepted Mary's letters, broke her cipher, and added a damning postscript to lure her conspirators into the open. The decrypted messages were not just intelligence, they were a death warrant. Mary's own words, once thought safe in cipher, became the primary evidence used to convict her of treason and send her to the executioner's block. Her story is a stark lesson in the absolute trust a monarch had to place in their cipher and the devastating price of that trust being broken. In this relentless environment where a single cracked code could topple a crown, the quiet work of the codebreaker was no longer a scholarly exercise. It was the sharpest weapon in a silent war, a war fought not on battlefields but in the shadows of every royal court across Europe. A sealed letter carried by a trusted rider was a point of extreme vulnerability in the medieval world. To intercept a message, adversaries employed methods as cunning as the ciphers meant to protect them. On a dark, wooded road, a lone messenger might be waylaid by armed men, his diplomatic pouch seized before he could even draw a weapon. Yet violence was often a last resort. A more subtle and equally effective strategy was bribery. A disgruntled court official, a lowly scribe, or even a servant with access to a noble's chambers could be persuaded with gold to deliver a letter for just a few hours, long enough for it to be copied. The most sophisticated interception, however, occurred in spaces known as black chambers. These were secret rooms, often hidden within major postal stations or inns along well-traveled routes. Here, skilled operatives would perform a delicate operation. They would gently steam open the wax seal of a targeted letter, make a perfect copy of its contents, and then reseal it with a flawless replica of the original stamp. The sender and recipient would continue their correspondence, completely unaware that a third, silent party was reading every word. This entire shadowy enterprise relied on absolute secrecy. The moment an enemy suspected their messages were being read, they would change their cipher, rendering all the interceptors' efforts useless. So the captured message had to be delivered to the codebreaker with the utmost discretion, preserving the illusion of security for as long as possible. The successful capture of a cipher was merely the prelude, the quiet gathering of a puzzle before the true masters of the craft began their painstaking work of unlocking its secrets. While the courts of Europe perfected the art of writing in secrets, a revolution was quietly unfolding in the study halls of the Islamic world. Arab scholars were not just creating ciphers, they were building a science for dismantling them. In the 9th century, the brilliant polymath Al-Kindi composed a manuscript that would fundamentally reshape the landscape of secret communication. His work, titled A Manuscript on Deciphering Cryptographic Messages, contained a devastatingly simple yet powerful insight. He formally described the technique of frequency analysis, the systematic counting of how often each letter or symbol appears in a coded text. Al-Kindi understood that language is not random, that every tongue has a unique fingerprint. In Arabic, just as in Latin or English, certain letters are used far more frequently than others. His revolutionary idea was to turn this linguistic truth into a master key. A codebreaker could take an encrypted message, tally every symbol, and the one that appeared most often was almost certainly a substitute for the most common letter in the language. From that single foothold, the entire structure of a simple substitution cipher could be systematically unraveled. This was the moment cryptanalysis was born, not as a guessing game, but as a rigorous mathematical discipline. Arab scholars treated secret writing as a formal branch of mathematics, advancing it far beyond the ad hoc, trial and error methods still common in Europe. This foundational knowledge did not remain isolated for long. Through the vibrant intellectual exchanges in Sicily and Spain, where scholars from different cultures and faiths worked side by side, these advanced ideas began to filter into the West. The very techniques developed in the East to break ciphers were the same tools that would soon supercharge code-breaking efforts in European courts. This transfer of knowledge reveals a profound truth, that the silent war of wits was never a purely European story, but a truly interconnected, global pursuit of intellectual power. A codebreaker staring at a fresh cipher faced a fundamental question before any frequency analysis could even begin. What language was he even trying to read? Medieval Europe was a veritable Babel of tongues. A diplomatic message from the Papal States was likely written in Latin. A secret communication between French nobles would be in Old French, and a merchant's report from the Mediterranean might be in Arabic. This was the first and most daunting hurdle. The entire science of frequency analysis, the counting of common letters, was useless if you did not know the linguistic landscape of the original text. The letter frequency for Latin, where E is common but not dominant, is different from that of Italian or English. A codebreaker had to be a master linguist, fluent not only in vocabulary but in the very rhythm and skeleton of a language. He would scan the scrambled symbols, searching for patterns that whispered a language's name. He might look for the telltale ghost of common words. In a Latin text, the short, powerful word Deus, meaning God, was a prime target. In a French cipher, the phrase Le Roi, the king, would leave a distinct pattern. Spotting these fragments was like recognizing a familiar face in a dense crowd. This linguistic layer transformed the codebreaker's task into a dual challenge. It was a puzzle box within a puzzle box. First, he had to correctly deduce the underlying language through a mix of intuition, cultural knowledge, and sheer guesswork. Only then could he apply the mathematical rigor of frequency analysis to crack the cipher itself. This demanded more than academic knowledge. It required a deep, almost innate cultural understanding of the message origin. A codebreaker had to think like a French noble, reason like an Italian bishop, and anticipate like an Arab scholar. His success depended on his ability to cross not just cryptographic barriers, but the very boundaries of culture and tongue, making his mind the true meeting point of a divided world. A king's secret letter was not the only place you would find a hidden message. The art of the cipher escaped the royal chancery and found a vibrant new life in the world of literature. Authors and poets began weaving secret codes directly into their stories and verses, transforming public entertainment into a vessel for private and often perilous ideas. Geoffrey Chaucer, the celebrated father of English poetry, was suspected of being one such literary cryptographer. Scholars analyzing the Canterbury Tales have long pondered strange numerical patterns and cryptic astrological references scattered throughout the work. Some believe these are not mere decorative details, but a sophisticated cipher concealing advanced alchemical knowledge or heretical theological views that would have been dangerous to state openly in his time. This was not simple substitution, but a deeper form of steganography. the art of hiding a message in plain sight within an innocent-looking container. A far more common and beautifully simple form of this was the acrostic. A poet would compose a verse where the first letter of each line, read vertically downward, spelled out a secret word or name. To the casual reader, it was a perfectly normal poem, but to an initiated few, the first letters alone revealed a dangerous dedication to a fallen patron, a political slogan, or a statement of forbidden belief. This practice allowed a writer to publicly declare a secret allegiance while maintaining plausible deniability. The literary cipher was a defensive weapon for the mind, a way to participate in the most dangerous intellectual debates of the era without risking imprisonment or the stake. Unlocking these hidden layers does more than solve a puzzle. It rewrites our understanding of the medieval world. It reveals that the drive to conceal meaning was not confined to spies and diplomats, but was a widespread intellectual habit, a necessary skill for any thinker operating near the edge of acceptable thought. The line between a beautiful poem and a complex encryption was often vanishingly thin, proving that the cipher's influence had seeped deep into the very bedrock of culture. The fierce rivalries of Renaissance Italy transformed ciphers from tools of secrecy into engines of statecraft. In the shadowy corridors of power in Venice, Florence, and Milan, the silent war of codes reached a fever pitch. These city-states, locked in a perpetual dance of alliance and betrayal, understood that a single decrypted message could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin. This environment of constant high-stakes competition became a crucible for cryptographic innovation, pushing the art of secret writing to its absolute limits. The Venetian Council of Ten, a powerful committee governing security and intelligence, operated one of the most sophisticated cryptographic machines of the era. They maintained a dedicated black chamber where intercepted letters from rival states were secretly opened, copied, and expertly resealed. To manage their own flood of sensitive communications, they employed a rotating roster of cipher secretaries. No single secretary was allowed to hold the position for too long, a deliberate security measure to prevent any one person from knowing all of the Republic's secrets. The surviving archives of these states provide a stunning record of this rapid evolution. We can trace, year by year, how a simple substitution cipher used by a Venetian ambassador was cracked, leading immediately to the adoption of a new system filled with nulls and homophones. Then, when that system showed weaknesses, it was discarded for an even more complex polyalphabetic cipher. This was a true arms race, driven by the direct feedback of failure and success. Each captured dispatch was not just an intelligence coup, it was a free lesson in the enemy's latest cryptographic techniques, lessons that were immediately studied, reverse-engineered, and used to build a better lock. This frantic pace of innovation, born from political fragmentation and relentless suspicion, demonstrates a powerful truth. Necessity is not just the mother of invention, it is the mother of rapid, relentless, and brilliant evolution. The very instability that made Italy a battlefield forged it into a laboratory, creating cipher systems whose complexity would not be matched for centuries. Behind the grand narratives of kings and cryptographers lies a silent history, the story of women whose contributions to the cipher arts were vital yet systematically erased. While their names are seldom in the official records, their influence permeated the very foundations of medieval secret communication. Consider the formidable Elena of Aquitaine, ruler of a vast empire and a master of political strategy. Her court was a nexus of power, and to manage her intricate networks across England and France, she would have been a constant consumer of encrypted messages, relying on their security to coordinate alliances and manage rebellions. Her role was not passive. To command such a web of influence, she needed to understand the systems protecting her words, implicitly trusting and perhaps even guiding the cipher secretaries in her employ. In the turbulent Wars of the Roses, Margaret of Anjou fiercely defended her son's claim to the English throne. Such a desperate political and military fight would have been impossible without secure lines of communication. She was not merely receiving letters, she was likely dictating their sensitive content, actively participating in a cryptographic dialogue that held her cause together. For these queens, the cipher was not an abstract tool but an extension of their will, a digital lifeline in a world that often sought to silence their authority. But what of the women who are not queens, those who worked with ink and parchment rather than seals of state? Look to the convents. In an age where female literacy was a rarity, monastic communities were islands of learning for women. Nuns were prolific scribes and illustrators, painstakingly copying and preserving knowledge. Immersed in the world of manuscripts, they were perfectly positioned to encounter the simple substitution ciphers used to protect intellectual property. It is not a great leap to imagine a learned abbess, responsible for her order's valuable writings, employing a basic cipher to safeguard a unique herbal remedy or a controversial spiritual text. The evidence for their direct involvement is by its very nature almost invisible. The patriarchal structures of the time rarely credited women for intellectual labor, and the secretive work of ciphering would have been doubly concealed. Yet this absence of proof is not proof of absence. It speaks instead to a hidden layer of participation, where intelligent women in powerful families may have managed the domestic ciphers that protected family secrets and business dealings, their minds shaping the codes that guarded their world. Their untold stories represent the deepest layer of this secretive craft, a whisper of lost voices from the shadows of history. A brilliant cipher could be undone by a single careless moment. The silent war between codemaker and codebreaker was often decided not by intellectual superiority, but by simple human error. Even the most complex polyalphabetic system, a labyrinth of shifting alphabets, was rendered useless if the person wielding it grew complacent. The first and most fatal mistake was the overuse of a cipher key. A king, comfortable with his system, might use the same set of rules for years. Every message sent with that key was another piece of a puzzle, giving codebreakers a growing archive of text to analyze. They could compare messages, look for recurring patterns in the chaos, and slowly, painstakingly, deduce the logic behind the substitutions. A key was meant to be a temporary shield, but users treated it as a permanent wall. Another common error was rooted in habit. Official correspondence often began with highly predictable phrases. A letter might start with "To my most gracious Lord the King" or "In the name of God." These formal openings were a gift to any codebreaker. They were known plaintext, a fixed piece of the original message that could be laid directly over the encrypted symbols. If you knew that the first 7 symbols of a coded message represented those 7 specific words, you could instantly reverse engineer a portion of the key. This single crib could unlock the entire system, revealing how the cipher transformed known letters and providing the foothold needed to climb the rest of the message. Ambiguity born from haste was another silent betrayer. A scribe working late by candlelight might form a symbol with a shaky hand. Was that a carefully drawn null, a meaningless character meant to mislead, or was it simply a sloppy version of a real letter? Poor penmanship introduced fatal uncertainty, forcing the codebreaker to pursue multiple possibilities at once, one of which would inevitably lead to the truth. The greatest vulnerability was always human laziness. A tired encoder might forget to insert a single null. He might misspell a word and, instead of encoding the error, write the correction in plaintext right next to the cipher. That one unencrypted word, sitting amidst a sea of secret symbols, was like a lighthouse in a fog. It confirmed the language being used, revealed a fragment of the message's content, and gave the codebreaker an absolute reference point from which to begin their assault. These tiny slips, these moments of inattention, were the cracks through which empires were spied upon and plots were uncovered. The security of a kingdom could hinge on the steady hand and sharp mind of a single scribe, a reminder that the most advanced lock is worthless if the person holding the key is careless. Even the most brilliant cipher was useless if the letter containing it fell into the wrong hands. The security of a secret was a chain with many links, and the code itself was only the first. A message had to survive a dangerous journey across bandit-infested roads and through rival territories, forcing spies and diplomats to become masters of physical concealment. Sensitive information was often written on tiny scraps of vellum or paper, minimizing the physical object that had to be hidden. These slips were then carefully sewn into the lining of a doublet, tucked inside the sole of a boot, or rolled tightly and concealed within a hollowed-out coin. The goal was to make the message disappear into the mundane landscape of a traveler's belongings. The final layer of defense was the wax seal, an intricate impression from a signet ring bearing a noble's coat of arms or a personal emblem was more than just a signature. It was a tamper-evident lock. Any attempt to gently steam open the letter or pry the wax apart would leave telltale cracks, splinters, or a smudged image, warning the recipient that the message had been compromised. For the most critical communications, the physical object was eliminated entirely. Trusted messengers would commit the entire text to memory, destroying the original document. They became living, breathing vessels of secret information, carrying the words in their mind until they could recite them verbatim to the intended recipient. This practice removed the risk of interception completely, placing the entire burden of security on human memory and loyalty. Perhaps the most enigmatic testament to this obsession with physical and cryptographic security is the Voynich manuscript. This mysterious book, filled with undeciphered text and perplexing illustrations of unknown plants and celestial charts, represents an ultimate fortress of secrecy. Its very nature is a perfect storm of protection. The cipher remains unbroken, the language is unidentified, and the purpose of the bizarre illustrations is utterly obscure. It is a message protected by layers of physical obscurity and intellectual encryption, a locked box whose key has been lost to time. This relentless layering of security measures reveals a constant, grinding anxiety. A single point of failure, a torn lining, a broken seal, or a bribed messenger could unravel everything. The silent war of wits was fought not just over ciphers, but over every stitch of clothing and every drop of wax that stood between a secret and its enemy. A cipher's strength no longer relied on letters alone. The medieval mind discovered that numbers offered a far more potent and flexible language for secrecy. Cipher creators began constructing elaborate numerical substitution tables where every letter of the alphabet was assigned a specific number. The word king might be written as 11, 24, 14, 7. This was more than a simple swap. It was a conceptual leap that transformed a linguistic puzzle into a mathematical one. It opened the door to manipulating the entire message through arithmetic. A codemaker could instruct his ally to add 5 to every number in the message before sending it, and the recipient would simply subtract 5 to read it. This is the essence of modular arithmetic, a concept that would take centuries to be formally named, but whose intuitive power was already being harnessed in candlelit scriptoria. A number-based cipher was incredibly resilient. It completely bypassed the visual patterns that could betray a symbolic cipher, and it forced the codebreaker to first recognize that he was looking at numbers, not letters, before he could even begin his work. To further shroud their work in mystery, cryptographers dipped into the vast well of esoteric knowledge. They peppered their messages with symbols from astrology, like the sign for Saturn, or from alchemy, like the sigil for Quicksilver. To an untrained eye, these messages looked less like military dispatches and more like pages from a book of magic, deliberately crafted to appear incomprehensible or even dangerous. This fusion created a secret language that was 3 layers deep. It blended the linguistic, the mathematical, and the mystical, demanding a truly Renaissance mind long before the Renaissance officially began. A person needed to be a linguist to understand the base message, a mathematician to unravel the numerical encoding, and a scholar of the occult to recognize the deceptive symbols for what they were. This multidisciplinary approach was not just clever, it was a necessary evolution. It pointed unmistakably toward the future, where the fate of nations would hinge not on poems written in code, but on vast, complex calculations performed by machines. A mysterious book sits in a vault at Yale University, its pages filled with a script no one on Earth can read. This is the Voynich Manuscript, the ultimate locked room mystery from the medieval world. Its pages are a gallery of the bizarre, illustrated with plants that do not exist, astrological diagrams of unknown constellations, and paintings of tiny, nude women bathing in strange green tubs. Every single word is written in a unique, flowing script, an alphabet that matches no known language. For centuries, the finest codebreakers, from Renaissance mystics to modern intelligence agencies, have tried to crack it. They have all failed. This book is the cipher that broke the world. One of the most compelling figures linked to this puzzle is the 13th century Franciscan friar Roger Bacon. He was a man centuries ahead of his time, a scientist and philosopher who wrote extensively on optics, alchemy, and the need for experimental verification. Crucially, he also wrote about secret writing and ciphers, possessing the exact kind of brilliant, esoteric mind that could have conceived of such an elaborate puzzle. The theory that Bacon authored the manuscript adds a layer of profound intrigue, suggesting it may contain advanced scientific or philosophical knowledge he feared would be lost or condemned. Is the Voynich manuscript a complex cipher disguising forbidden knowledge? Is it a constructed language, a complete invented tongue created for some unknown purpose? Or is it, as some skeptics argue, an elaborate and meaningless hoax, a medieval forgery designed to fool a wealthy patron? Each possibility is as fascinating as the next. If it is a cipher, it is a polyalphabetic system of such staggering complexity that it has resisted every form of frequency analysis. If it is a language, its grammar and syntax are utterly alien. And if it is a hoax, it is a work of such meticulous, generation-spanning dedication that its very creation becomes a different kind of marvel. The manuscript represents the romantic ideal of the unbreakable code. It is a siren song for cryptographers, a monument to the limits of human understanding. It stands as a silent, defiant challenge, a reminder that some doors from the past remain firmly shut, guarding secrets we can only dream of uncovering. The relentless push for better ciphers did not end with the medieval period. It ignited a fire. The intellectual framework built by monks and royal secretaries, with all its flaws and brilliant patches, became the essential foundation for a cryptographic renaissance. The very problems that plagued medieval codebreakers, like the fatal weakness of the monoalphabetic cipher to frequency analysis, were the exact puzzles that inspired a new generation of thinkers. Into this arena stepped Leon Battista Alberti, a 15th-century Italian polymath who saw the limitations of the old systems and envisioned a mechanical solution. He invented the cipher disk, a revolutionary device made of 2 concentric circles, one inscribed with the standard alphabet and the other with a scrambled version. By turning the discs to a prearranged alignment, a user could quickly encipher a message. But Alberti's true genius was a simple instruction. After encoding a few words, he advised the user to randomly turn the disc to a new position. This single act, this sporadic shift, created the world's first practical polyalphabetic cipher. It was the medieval homophone concept made dynamic and mechanical, finally achieving what earlier systems had only hinted at. Where a medieval scribe had to painstakingly consult a table of symbols, Alberti's disk automated the process, making complex encryption faster and more accessible. This breakthrough was not born in a vacuum. It relied entirely on the institutional knowledge accumulated over centuries in places like the Vatican's secret chambers and the Venetian black rooms. These courts had become repositories of cryptographic success and failure, their archives filled with broken codes that served as a textbook for what not to do. The medieval era was not a dark age for secrecy. It was a long, crucial period of incubation, a slow simmer of ideas that would soon boil over. The widespread use of ciphers had cultivated a mindset, a way of thinking about information as something that could be actively protected and weaponized. This prepared the intellectual ground for the coming storm of the printing press, which would spread cryptographic knowledge like never before, and for the age of global exploration, where secure communication across vast oceans would become the lifeblood of empire. The silent war of wits was about to get much, much louder. A deciphered letter could fell a government without a single sword being drawn. When a state's codebreakers finally cracked a rival's cipher, it was as if they had been handed a key to their enemy's innermost thoughts. They could read the private fears of a foreign king, learn of his secret alliances, and anticipate his military moves months in advance. This was not merely an advantage, it was a form of absolute power, allowing a ruler to negotiate treaties from a position of unshakable strength. There are stunning historical accounts of council meetings where a single, decoded letter was produced and read aloud. In that moment, a trusted advisor might be revealed as a traitor, a planned invasion was laid bare, or a web of conspiracy was suddenly untangled, shifting the political landscape of Europe in an instant. The men who achieved these feats were no longer just scholars. They became strategic assets as valuable as an entire army, their quiet work in a back room capable of saving a kingdom from ruin. Yet this power came with a perilous catch. The intelligence gleaned from a broken cipher had to be wielded with the utmost care. A ruler who acted on every piece of secret knowledge would quickly arouse suspicion. If an enemy realized their cipher was compromised, they would immediately abandon it, slamming the door of intelligence shut forever. This created a delicate and constant dance. A monarch might have to allow a small betrayal to proceed, or pretend to be surprised by a minor military setback, all to protect the greater secret that they could read their opponent's mail. This art of using secret knowledge without exposing its source is a timeless feature of intelligence warfare, a game of shadows first perfected not in the 20th century, but in the stone corridors of medieval power, where a single broken code could whisper the fate of nations. A codebreaker's loyalty was absolute, but their conscience was another matter entirely. For the man hunched over a captured cipher, success was not always a clean victory. Unlocking a secret could mean exposing a private confession meant for a priest, or revealing the desperate words of a nobleman plotting against a tyrant. The moral weight of that decrypted text fell squarely on the codebreaker's shoulders. His ethical framework was not one of personal privacy or individual rights. It was defined entirely by the twin pillars of feudal obligation and religious duty. A codebreaker serving a king anointed by God would see his work as a sacred charge. Cracking the code of a rebellious lord was not an invasion of privacy. It was an act of divine service, protecting the God-given order from the sin of treachery. In this worldview, there were likely no codes he was permitted to refuse to break. The very act of secret communication from an enemy was, by its nature, proof of evil intent. The private was inherently political and therefore fair game. This unflinching sense of purpose stands in stark contrast to our modern dilemmas. Today, we debate whether a government should have a master key to every citizen's private messages, balancing security against a fundamental right to privacy. For the medieval codebreaker, no such debate existed. His duty was to his master's security, full stop. The morality of his actions was determined by who held power and whether that power was considered legitimate. This reminds us that the ethics of secrecy are never fixed. They are a reflection of the society that practices them, bending to the will of kings and the dictates of faith, leaving the individual codebreaker to navigate the shadows between his duty and the human cost of his genius. Our everyday language is a living museum of their craft. We still speak of a cipher, a word that began its journey not in a royal court, but as the Arabic cipher, meaning zero or empty. It was a mathematical term for nothingness that was brilliantly repurposed to describe the art of making a message appear as nothing, as empty gibberish, to all but the initiated. This transformation from a number to a concept of secrecy perfectly encapsulates the interdisciplinary genius of the field, where mathematics and linguistics merged into a new science. From cipher we get decipher, the act of unlocking that emptiness to find meaning. We talk of a code, another term from their world, and most importantly, we speak of the key. That single word holds the same power today as it did then. It is not a physical object but the secret knowledge, the rulebook that locks and unlocks the hidden truth. Even the word clue has a shadowy origin in this world of puzzles. It is thought to derive from clue, the ball of thread that guided the hero Theseus safely out of the Minotaur's labyrinth. What is a codebreaker following if not a clue of logic? A slender thread of reason that guides them through the intricate maze of a coded message, leading them from confusion to clarity. Every time we use these words, we are unconsciously paying homage to those shadowy figures hunched over parchment. Their legacy is not locked away in dusty manuscripts, but is alive in our very speech, a subtle testament to how deeply the art of secrecy is woven into the fabric of how we think and communicate. Take the simple command, meet at dawn. In the hands of a medieval clerk, this plain text is a liability. His first task is to choose a key, the secret rule that will transform it. Let us use a classic Caesar cipher with a shift of 3. He writes out the standard alphabet, and directly beneath it, he starts the cipher alphabet not with A, but with D. A becomes D, B becomes E, C becomes F, and so on, all the way to Z, which wraps around to become C. Now he transcribes his message letter by letter. M, following his new rule, becomes P. The first E becomes H, the second E also becomes H, T becomes W. The word meet is now encrypted as PHHW. He continues, encoding the space as another space. A becomes D, T becomes W, then dawn, D becomes G, A becomes D, W becomes Z, and N becomes Q. The final encrypted message reads PHHW space DW space GDZQ. To the untrained eye, it is perfect nonsense, a string of characters that reveals nothing. This ciphertext would be entrusted to a messenger, while the vital key, the instruction shift by 3, would be memorized or sent via an entirely different route, perhaps with a different courier. The entire system's security hinges on that separation, yet in this elegant simplicity lies its fatal weakness. look at the encrypted text. Notice the double H. In the original, that was a double E, and that strange ZQ at the end was once WN. A codebreaker seeing this would immediately begin counting. If the letter H appears most frequently, it is a safe bet it represents E. Once that connection is made, the entire shift is revealed. What feels like an unbreakable code to the user is, for the analyst, a puzzle with a very obvious first piece. This practical exercise illuminates the immense challenge faced by both sides. The codemaker had to trust in the obscurity of his system, while the codebreaker had to see through the chaos to find the hidden order. To defend against this, cipher clerks had to become more creative, leading to the next evolution in their secret war. The same intellectual arms race that echoed through medieval scriptoria now powers the digital world around you. Every time you send a secure message or make an online purchase, you are benefiting from principles forged 1,000 years ago. The pivotal leap from a monoalphabetic to a polyalphabetic cipher is the direct conceptual ancestor of our modern encryption algorithms. That medieval breakthrough, which shattered predictable patterns to create a labyrinth of shifting rules, is the same fundamental idea that secures your data today, just operating at a speed and scale those monks could never have dreamed of. This evolution mirrors the constant escalation in our own time. The medieval back and forth, where a broken cipher immediately spurred the invention of a stronger one, is precisely mirrored in the endless duel between cybersecurity experts and hackers. Each time a vulnerability is found in a piece of software, a patch is developed, forcing attackers to find a new approach in a cycle of action and reaction that has continued without pause for centuries. Even the human frailties remain identical: the need for absolute trust in a secret key, the catastrophic risk of a single careless error, and the profound ethical questions of who should hold the power to unlock secrets. These are not new dilemmas. They are the timeless constants in the story of secrecy. Recognizing this long arc of history transforms our understanding of digital security. It is not a sterile, modern invention. It is the latest chapter in a deeply human quest for privacy and trust, a journey that began with a monk's pen and a flickering candle, and now stretches into the vast, interconnected digital universe. The legacy of the medieval codebreaker is etched not in stone, but in the very architecture of our modern world. We have traced a riveting journey from quiet monastic cells to the thunderous halls of power, revealing that this lost art was anything but a primitive curiosity. It was a sophisticated and dynamic battlefield of wits, a silent war where intellect was the ultimate weapon. These hidden dialogues, scribbled on parchment and protected by wax seals, genuinely shaped the course of history. They decided the fate of armies on distant fields, toppled conspiracies from within, and shored up the authority of the most powerful institutions of the age, from the papacy to the rising monarchies of Europe. The medieval codebreaker emerges as a pivotal figure in the shadows, a unique fusion of linguist, mathematician, and spy. Their story is a powerful testament to brilliant ingenuity, relentless curiosity, and the timeless human drive to both protect and uncover secrets. This ancient quest for secure communication is the direct ancestor of the digital encryption that safeguards your life today. The next time you send a secure message or enter a password, remember the long chain of innovation that leads back to those monks, kings, and scholars who began this grand pursuit 1,000 years ago. Their candlelit work in a world of parchment and ink laid the foundation for our own age of global connection. If you enjoyed unraveling these historical mysteries with us, please subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. We would love to hear your thoughts, so tell us in the comments below, what is the most fascinating cipher or historical secret you have ever encountered?